Setting up VirtualBox. In this section, I will give you a brief introduction to virtualization concepts, why do we care about virtualization, and the various virtualization software available in the marketplace. In this class, we will be using VirtualBox, so I will quickly show you how and where you can download VirtualBox from, installing it, so you can install, configure the guest Linux operating system on your host computer to be used for Hadoop. So what is virtualization? Virtualization is creation of virtual, not physical version of IT infrastructure. When I say virtual, I mean virtualized server rather than physical instance of a server. Even your storage devices such as your hard drive can be virtualized. Your network devices such as firewalls and routers can be virtualized. And the cool thing is even your operating system can be virtualized, which means you can run a virtualized Linux operating system on top of a Windows operating system. Virtualization has become a big trend in the IT industry, especially in terms of data center consolidation and data center maintenance and management and monitoring. But why do we care about virtualization in this class? We care about it because we want to run Hadoop. But Hadoop runs best on Linux. Although I have to say that Hortonworks and Microsoft have gotten together and they have done a fairly good job in running Microsoft on the Windows platform, but we are going to be running Hadoop on Linux platform. And since many of you have different hardware and different operating systems on your laptop or PC, we want to run Linux virtualized. So it's a standard for all of us when we are doing our projects and assignments. The idea here is that you have your PC or laptop hardware. On top of it, you may have an operating system, such as the Windows operating system. On top of it, we're going to install some kind of a virtualization software. VirtualBox would be an example of that. On top of it, we'll install virtualized Linux, like the CentOS Linux. And then on top of it, we will install Hadoop, so that we can run Hadoop daemons and do big data processing using Hadoop. So what are the virtualization software vendors in the marketplace? We have VMware, Parallels, both are paid versions. Then there is an open source version of virtualization from Oracle. It's called Oracle VirtualBox. This is what we are going to be using in this class. So what is VirtualBox? VirtualBox is a cross-platform virtualization software, which means it is available on the Windows platform, the Mac OS X platform, Linux, and even Solaris. So you can download a version of VirtualBox software for that particular operating system, install it, and then you can run virtualized operating system on top of that. It can be installed on any Intel or AMD based computer, which most of you should be having. If you're running anything different, please let me know. Of course, it's a free open source software from Oracle. We like the fact that it's free and open source. That's great. So we'll be using this. And the great thing about VirtualBox is that you can run multiple operating systems at the same time. You can run Windows on Linux on your Mac if you want to. Or if you want, you can run Windows Server 8, 2008 on your Linux server. You can run Linux on your Windows PC. You can even run Mac on your Mac if you want, or Linux on Linux. But we're going to be running Linux on your operating system, whatever you have installed in your hardware. There are some key virtualization VirtualBox terms that we should be aware of. Host operating system. It's the operating system of your physical computer. Your PC or your laptop or whatever your physical server is has some kind of an operating system installed on it, and that's what we call the host operating system. Guest operating system is the operating system that is going to be running inside the virtual machine on top of your existing operating system. So it's the virtualized operating system. Virtual machine or VM is a special environment that VirtualBox or any kind of virtualization software creates for the guest operating system. You can actually create even virtualized networks and have all the virtual machines communicate within that particular network. Guest editions is actually a very specialized software to be installed inside the VM. This is a very special concept from VirtualBox. The idea here is that if you install guest editions in your VM, in your guest virtual machine operating system, it can improve performance of your guest operating system and also gives you some extra features such as port forwarding, sharing USB drives. Some of the key VirtualBox features are shared folders, allows for sharing or folders between the guest and the host operating system. You can also do port forwarding, which means from your host operating system, you can connect to ports that's in the guest operating system and vice versa. You can also do 64-bit emulation. You can also install a USB drive in your hardware, in your computer, and see that particular hardware in your guest operating system. So there's a lot of cool features that VirtualBox provides. Downloading VirtualBox. If you want to download and install VirtualBox, you can go to virtualbox.org. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Here I am. As you can see, you can get VirtualBox for most of the operating systems that you care about. We have Windows, OS X, Linux, and Solaris. Of course, I'm going to be downloading OS X version of it, which is what I have actually already done, and I've already installed it. Some of you may already have Linux, and you might say, why do I need to run Linux on top of Linux as a virtualization software? You don't really have to. If you know Linux fairly well, then you may be able to run Hadoop on top of your Linux. But if you run it in a virtualized environment, the advantage is that it's a controlled environment. I'm going to show you the different pieces of software that you need to install. So in that way, you will be in standard form with the rest of the class. That's the only advantage of it. But if you really care to not install VirtualBox and run virtualization and run Linux directly, you're welcome to do that. Once you have downloaded VirtualBox, you can double-click on the DMG file. In this case, since I'm using Mac, I have a DMG file. So you just take the software that you downloaded, you double-click on it, and let's go through the process of installing it. It'll give you an introduction window explaining to you the version of VirtualBox. We will be using VirtualBox 4.3 in this class. If there's a newer version available, you're welcome to use that too. Then it basically says that you have one hard drive and gives you the capacity of the hard drive. You then click on continue. Here's the place where you can change the installation location. I typically stick to the default, so it can install in the normal location, whether your Windows operating system or the Linux operating system or even the Mac operating system. And then it begins to install VirtualBox. It takes only a few seconds to install VirtualBox, and then you're done. So you have VirtualBox installed. So the whole process should take you no more than a couple of minutes to install and getting it going. So now your VirtualBox installed, which means you should see a little icon appearing in your desktop. There's the VirtualBox icon. You can double click on it. When you double click on it, it launches VirtualBox. When you launch VirtualBox, here's the VirtualBox application. You'll notice that on top, you see ways by which you can create a brand new VM. You can also change the settings on a VM. You'll also see on the left-hand side pane over here a list of existing VMs. When you install VirtualBox from scratch and you don't have any VMs, you will not see this particular message. You won't see this VM. This is my VM. I have a VM called Saraswati that I've already installed. That's why you're seeing that VM, but in your case, it'll probably be a blank pane. Okay, so in this section, we looked at virtualization concepts, including some of the key terminologies such as host operating system, guest operating system, VirtualBox editions. Since we will be using VirtualBox in this class, we learned how to download and install VirtualBox on your host computer so you can install and configure the guest Linux operating system in order to run Hadoop later on.